1998 Priesthood History in 5th through 8th grade class. I ask Heavenly Father to bless us with His Spirit as we continue our study of priesthood. The things of God can only be understood by the Spirit of God. And that's why we start all our teaching and training that way. And your teachers in this school, at least, even when they teach a math, English assignment, they're silently saying a prayer. Our next story is the death of Parley P. Pratt. I'll read this since it's short. It's from this history book. This is the year 1857, the day, May 13th. Parley P. Pratt was in the state of Arkansas. That's the state just south of Missouri. In the spring of the year, Apostle Pratt had stood trial in Arkansas on the charge of having married the wife and abducted the children of Hector McLean, a Louisianian by birth, but then a resident of California. The charge was not sustained, and the defendant was released. But McLean, his threat of vengeance and getting friends, caused Parley P. Pratt to flee, to run, try to get away. Trying to get away alone on horseback through an unknown country, he was caught by McLean and by McLean's friends. When they caught Parley P. Pratt, this man named McLean took his knife and he stabbed Parley P. Pratt many times, one time after another. And he also shot him in the chest. He grabbed a pistol that was on a friend, and McLean shot Parley P. Pratt. Nobody was ever arrested. They knew what would happen. Even though there were witnesses, the courts in that state would not prosecute. And so there died a faithful man, Parley P. Pratt. This happened in the state of Arkansas. I voiced that and pointed out because our next story is the story of the Meadows Massacre. There happened to be some immigrants, some Gentiles, going through Utah during the summer of 1857, and they just so happened to be from Arkansas. Toward the end of 1857 is when martial law was declared. When the Utah War was happening, men from all over Utah were assembled as an army, a militia. And going through the territory of Utah was this group of immigrants from Arkansas. Some have wondered, is this what made people hate them so? Maybe it's a reason the massacre happened. The history books describe this Meadows Massacre as the darkest page of Utah history. It is a sad and a terrible event. And as it happened, the devil and evil people would use this to try to hurt Brigham Young. That's why we tell the story. Men who were members of the church committed murder. Of course, they were cut off from the church and no longer allowed in. But at the time, they held an office or a place in the church. These men were part of the Utah militia, who were to fight the Indians or any invading army from the United States. So there was a spirit and attitude of war and anxiousness to fight in the hearts of many. Brigham Young got after many of the saints. They wanted to so much go and fight and kill. He said, I've had to calm down my brethren to make them not want to go and kill the enemy. And Brigham Young wanted no bloodshed, at least the blood of people. We told you the story of the Utah War, how it was settled peaceably, how the prophet and the faithful did stand firm and true to his command and didn't shed blood. But here in southern Utah, there were some men that weren't close to Brigham Young. They had some of their own ideas, and they were members of an army, the Utah militia, and they thought the enemy must be conquered. This group of immigrants from Arkansas numbered around 130 or so. They were just bad people. The people of Arkansas, as they traveled through Utah, they went down pretty much the route we travel for down south. They went to Beaver, on down to Cedar City. And Cedar City was the furthest south city at that time. After Cedar City, it was going across desert toward California in that time. But as this group of immigrants went through central Utah, they caused a whole world of trouble. They shot and killed some Indians. They poisoned some meat that killed many Indians. And as the Indians found out some of their number were killed, you know the Indian law. If somebody's killed, then you have to kill some of them. And so groups of Indians followed this train of immigrants down through Utah. The Utah militia, made mostly of the saints, the Utah militia was there to buy off the Indians. When the Indians were going to attack that wagon train of immigrants from Arkansas, many times men like Jacob Hamblin and others would say, no, don't kill them, here's some beef or here's some food. They kind of paid them off to keep them peaceful. More than once, the Mormons protected this wagon train of immigrants. But still, the immigrants were very violent even toward the saints. They said, part of us were there when Joseph Smith was killed, or they'd shake their gun in the face of the sheriffs or marshals in the towns. We'll kill you before you can arrest any of us. And we're going to join with the U.S. Army when they come in here, and we're going to kill the Mormons. They're always talking that way. Very wicked, very loud, very threatening to the saints. But the saints treated them properly. The counsel of the priesthood at that time, Brigham Young's counsel to the people was, don't give very much food away. We need to save it. We might have a long war. We don't want to just give it to anybody. So as this group of immigrants from Arkansas, these Gentiles, went through Utah, there wasn't much food to buy. So they'd have to stop and feed their animals off the grasses and the fields and the mountains. The saints were kindly and humane, it says. They fed them if they were really hungry. But this made these immigrants, these travelers from Arkansas, angry at the saints. Always threatening, always obnoxious. And as they were rude and evil toward people and toward Indians and shooting at Indians, the Indians started shooting back. And again, the Utah militia had to protect this group of immigrants from the Indians. Not only that, word had got to Utah that Parley P. Pratt was killed by people from Arkansas. So some people who easily would get mad would be affected by this. Cedar City was the last place this group of immigrants from Arkansas met the saints. And they determined they were going to go off up into the mountains a little ways to a place called Mountain Meadow, where there was good grass. They were going to fatten their animals, make it so that the animals would be well fed before they went across the desert. It was right toward the 1st of September when all this excitement came to a climax, to a head. And that's also the time when Lot Smith was starting to attack the wagons and the cattle herds. So here it was, the saints saying we're loyal, we don't destroy anybody, we don't kill people. And suddenly, in southern Utah, the Indians and some of the white people who were members of the church did kill people. And now you can see this would give the government some sort of excuse to attack the saints. Yet the word didn't get out of the Mountain Meadow Massacre for a little while. That wasn't the motive for the government coming here. I'm telling you the story of this attack, and there's quite a lesson here, because if you get with people who are mad, you'll get mad or angry. You just need to be careful and not partake of an angry spirit. Because there were even young men, part of the Utah militia, that were right among people who got angry, and they just went along with it. They found themselves in the wrong place. The Arkansas immigrants were so rude in Cedar City. They threatened to kill the saints. They'd said openly, we're going to come back and kill you. It made some of the saints mad. And that's the test. That's the keep sweet test. In this story, there's a particular man, Klingensmith. He was a member of the church. As far as I remember, he had been a bishop. There's another man named John D. Lee. He's the man that settled at Lee's Ferry. Uncle Roy's father, Warren Johnson, moved there after John D. Lee came away. So Warren Johnson lived at Lee's Ferry, but it remained named Lee's Ferry. This John D. Lee was a captain in the Utah militia. And the saints wondered, the Utah militia wondered, should we take these Gentiles prisoner? Because they keep threatening to join the army and fight us. And should we take them captive because the Indians want to kill them? That was the question they sent to different leaders of the militia who were also members of the church. Sometimes messages were sent all the way to Salt Lake Valley. And the final message was sent to Brigham Young. What should we do with these immigrants from Arkansas? Should we take them prisoner? Or should we let them go? Brigham Young would send a message. At all costs, if it takes everything you have, you protect that wagon train. Don't let those Arkansas people get hurt. But the word of Brigham Young didn't arrive in time. This massacre was the killing of all the people 8 years and up. Men, women, and children, and many younger children were killed. That's what a massacre means. And then the people that did the killing entered into a secret promise with each other they would never tell on each other. So it was a long time, it was years, before anyone was brought to justice for this terrible crime. And it was a terrible crime. The massacre took place over several days. It wasn't just a one-time sudden thing. It was a continual attack. And it got to where some of the whites, the Americans, joined with the Indians. The Indians had gathered perhaps a couple of hundred. They were determined to kill. There was one certain Indian chief. He told his band of warriors that he had a dream where he saw blood on his hands, and he said, "It's time to go kill." Again, I remind you of the Indian law. If one of them are killed, they have to kill some of the whites. And thus Indians from all around were gathered together. Orders were sent by the leaders of the Utah militia in Cedar City and Beaver and different towns. Protect those immigrants. Fight the Indians if you have to. So there was actually a small group of the Utah militia that went toward where the massacre was happening. They were so few in number, they couldn't fight off all those Indians. In one of the councils, this man named Clingan Smith, that's one name, Clingan Smith, he showed his true nature. He says, we have to attack those people. He was in for the fight. He was upset. And he happened to be one of the Utah militia that went toward the place where these Arkansas immigrants were staying at Mountain Meadow. On the 7th, a Monday, I think this is September 7th, 1857, the attack started. Indians surrounded this camp. They started shooting. There were 137 immigrants. 23 were killed with the first attack. From Indians, no whites there yet. Some of these white people were off away, and the Indians captured them and killed them. And during Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days, the Indians kept shooting at the wagons. These Arkansas people had thrown up banks of dirt around the wagon wheels. Some had dug a hole in the middle as a rifle pit. And they were firing back, and they were good shots. But they were mostly women and children, not all men. When word came to Cedar City and other places that the Indians were attacking this Arkansas band, members of the Utah militia headed that way. And John D. Lee arrived and tried to calm down the Indians. Brigham Young had sent word, keep the Indians away at all costs, even if it takes all the people in the county to come. And as this little war was going on through the whole week, people would run back and forth, both Indians and whites, telling what was happening. On Thursday, it started Monday, on Thursday, some reinforcements came. But by that time, there were so many Indians, a small number of Utah militia couldn't stop it. To try to stop the Indians would mean the Utah militia would have been killed. Now I'm going to do a little reading. The Indians, to show the nature of these Arkansas people, they took a couple of the whites of the Utah militia and said, okay, we'll see what you can do, if you're for us or against us. And they made 2 of the Utah militia dress up as Indians and run across the field. And the Arkansas militia shot at them. The Arkansas immigrants did. So Some thought that the whites were joining with the Indians at that time. Now came Clingan Smith. Clingan Smith, instead of fighting the Indians and giving their lives for the immigrants, they were angry at the Arkansas immigrants. They hadn't put forth enough effort. And finally, it was Lee and Clingan Smith who seemed to direct the affairs. And they decided that the Arkansas people were enemies and needed to be killed, or at least captured. The tragic part of this was that the white people, Clingan Smith, John D. Lee, went in with a flag of truce, a white flag, which means stop firing. The Arkansas people raised a flag of truce. And the Utah militia members, with Clingan Smith there and some others, they said, "Follow us. We'll lead you away from the Indians." So, as they went out and headed towards Cedar City, these men had agreed with the Indians. When we say halt, you attack. They went along and nobody said halt. The Indians got closer and closer. They got impatient. The Indians agreed not to kill these members of the Utah militia that were helping them. Finally, the Indians got so impatient, they suddenly attacked. And with the first shot, all the adults were killed. And then they went and killed all the children, down to about 8 years old. Its slaughter lasted for 2 or 3 minutes, the last killing of those people. The white people standing on, watching it. There were 17 orphans from age 3 months to 7 years old. And when other members of the Utah militia came, they took those children and put them out in other homes to be cared for now. The Indians went wild. They robbed the dead bodies and the wagons. And even Clingan Smith, he took some of the things and sold them at Cedar City for money. It says, "Scarcely had the bodies been buried when the leaders of the bloody work called their men together, and under the most binding oaths pledged them to secrecy. For years the unholy promise was kept, until finally the truth began to leak out. The names of men entirely innocent were mingled with those who were guilty. Of the militia, ordered or lured to the scene of the massacre by Lee and Clingan Smith, nearly all were young men who acted in innocence of evil. In most instances, the young men who were just part of the militia didn't do any killing. Here it was, September 1857. It wasn't until 1870 that finally John D. Lee would be brought to justice. The United States would use this incident to persecute the saints, saying, "Look, Mormons were involved." Finally, in 1870, Erastus Snow recommended to President Brigham Young, and John D. Lee was excommunicated from the church and told he could never be rebaptized again. And Clingan Smith had already left the church, and he wanted to turn state's evidence and accuse others of doing wrong. Another man, Isaac Hayat, just because he didn't stop the massacre, sending enough militia, he was cut off of the church. A terrible thing, a very sad event. I haven't read all the details and exactly who shot who. But now judges from the federal government thought they had something to destroy the Mormons with. There were other murders in Utah Territory. One of the new judges coming to Utah said he was going to arrest Brigham Young for this. Surely the Mormon leaders sent word to kill these immigrants. All this evidence, they said, proves it. This judge was called Judge Cradlebaugh. He was one of the judges that came west with Governor Cumming. And now there was a great argument between Judge Cradlebaugh and Governor Cumming, because Judge Cradlebaugh wanted Brigham Young arrested for this massacre and for other murders that were happening. There was no evidence, and it was not true. And I'll leave that story for tomorrow. But I want you to learn a lesson. When you get with people who are angry, it will be easy to get angry. And some of those young men who were there at the massacre were involved in the spirit of war and wanting to do away with the enemy. They weren't partaking of the spirit of the prophet, who wanted peace. When a priesthood man is sent to fight, he never gets angry. A priesthood man sent to fight still is required to keep sweet and have a spirit of peace. In fact, they're prayerful, asking the Lord to strengthen them to do right, but never bloodthirsty and angry. This man Clingan Smith in particular excited the people, the few that were with him, to help attack these immigrants from Arkansas. It has been a dark page on Utah history ever since. And of course, anyone who commits such sins cannot be part of the priesthood. They will be cast out. We face a day of great destruction when there will be mobs. For sure, if we get angry, the Lord won't protect us. We must keep the sweet and be filled with the Spirit of God. Live so the Lord will send fire from heaven if necessary, or angels, or whatever He decides to protect His saints. That will be a great test we must go through.